Hello everyone and welcome back to the Instagram live series that is kind of on YouTube now for So Yellow for Endo. This week I am joined by the lovely Becki, who's going to be sharing her experiences and her endometriosis diagnosis journey, surgery and all sorts of other things. Hello, it is so lovely to have you here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's such a great opportunity, I think, to talk to people who maybe don't either know much about endometriosis, or the other thing that's great about these series is the messages we get afterwards from people saying it's so nice to hear somebody else is going through what I'm going through. And so, as always, we say, if anything in this conversation strikes a chord with you, or if you want to talk to anyone or you're watching, I know my DMs are open. Come and talk to us, absolutely. And if you want after this to suddenly go, oh, I should probably get a doctor's appointment, also do that. Let us know. We want to support you. The endometriosis community is enormous and varied, and no two people have the same experience, but sadly lots of us share certain bits. But I'm so excited to be hearing your story today. So I think what would be lovely is if we kick off and you tell us maybe a little bit about how you first found out, how you were first diagnosed.
Okay, it's a bit of a long-winded story. I was an early starter with periods. I started at 10, and from about 15 onwards, I was suffering from really bad periods. I never actually got a diagnosis of endometriosis until I was 32, so that was 3 years ago.
Wow.
Yes, but I had, and I can never say this word, so forgive me, a laparoscopy.
Laparoscopy. There we go.
Yeah, that's it. I had one of them done when I was 18, actually, and they'd gone in and they'd burnt off tissue. And obviously now I realise why they'd done that. But I was told that I had an ovary that was clubbed and that they'd found lots of tissue. They'd burnt it off, but they never explained what it was. So I was fine for a few years after that. My heavy periods, everything had all sort of stopped. The pain had all sort of stopped. I went on to have children, and that was great. Complete accidents, but I was told I couldn't have them, so it was nice to have them. Yeah. But after having my second one, I started having problems again, and I was put back on contraceptive pills. I was admitted into hospital a couple of times because I was in so much pain. They obviously went through, is it your appendix? And I did have my appendix removed as a result of one of my trips.
Yeah.
They went through that. Then they went through, it could be a cyst, it could be this. And the time I actually went in and had my appendix removed, when they went in and removed the appendix, they found tissue on my bowels and in other areas of my body. They sent some off for sampling, but again, never said it was endometriosis. It was just, we found this. Your appendix were fine, but we've taken them out anyway. So at least in the future, it rules that out when you go back in front of gynae or go back into the hospital with pain. My periods were getting to a point where I would just drain through Tampax and pads, and it was becoming incredibly uncomfortable. And by the time I hit 30, I ended up in pain for more than a 2-week period of the month. So it was getting worse. And every time I went into hospital, they'd go, oh, you've probably had a cyst and it's burst and there's fluid in you. So there's probably an infection. So we'll treat that. And obviously by the time I'd finished the antibiotics, I would have had a period and I'd be okay again. And what they decided to do with some of my pain complaints and backing and forth into the doctors, I went to see my GP, who was also a specialist in gynae, and they had all the equipment at our surgery. And she said, I think you might have fibroids, so we'll get a referral in place for you to go back over to gynae. But in the meantime, I think we need to try taking you off the pill, maybe try something else. Maybe the injection will help, which actually made everything 10 times worse. And by the time I got to my, well, not even before I got to my referral, I ended up having a period of time in work where I was in so much pain I had to take time off because it became a constant of a month. And because of the amount of times that I've been on ibuprofen or any kind of anti-inflammatory, I became intolerant to it. So I would throw up until I passed out every time I took them. So
Oh,
none of those
awful.
pain reliefs were working, and what they had to put me on was things like codeine and painkillers that aren't really killing the pain, they're just putting you completely out of it.
Yeah, because it is at that point there are like I'm personally I'm allergic to codeine, and because I'm asthmatic I was very limited on what I could have, but I had like it was like Buscopan, paracetamol and mefenamic acid, and I had to take all three and still lie down. And you do still get this thing where people go, but can't you just take an ibuprofen and get on with it? And you're like, you don't understand.
See, the thing is, I'm asthmatic, so when they gave me codeine, they were really, really conscious of giving it to me. They then, so I had a horrific night. I was waiting for my referral. I was about 2 weeks away from my referral. I had toothache as well, so I was going through the motions. I was on codeine. I was heavily constipated, because if anybody takes codeine, it makes you constipated, which just makes the pain 10 times worse. And my other half said to me in the morning, that's it, I'm taking you to the hospital. I don't care whether your referral's only a few weeks away, I'm taking you to the hospital. And I went, you're going to have to take me to the dentist before you take me to the hospital. So literally went and had a tooth out, went into the hospital, numb tooth in, I was just in agony, and I was off my face on all the pain reliefs that they could give me. They went down the appendicitis. I haven't got appendix. Okay, all right. Maybe it's a cyst. Maybe you've got polycystic ovaries was another thing. And when they finally admitted me to the ward, the gynecologist that was seeing me was the gynecologist that I had been referred to.
Right.
And he said to me, because my referral was actually still through the NHS, but it was over at the private hospital, if I admit you under me here, then we are not going to get this moving forward quickly. I think you might have endometriosis. And he said, so I'm going to find a way of managing your pain that doesn't put you out of it, that doesn't give you the constipation, that doesn't cause you these problems. And he said, I know you've got an intolerance to ibuprofen, but I want to try you on diclofenac. I went, I can't take it. It still makes me sick. He went, no, I'm going to give it to you in suppository format. Which of course you can see I'm sitting there going, I'll just take anything, give me anything, don't care what. And that actually worked, and it got me to be in front of him. Obviously, because I've had children, the first thing he said to me was, we need to go in, we need to have a look, we can do an obliteration for you. But he said, you're of an age where you've had 2 children. Whilst I don't recommend it, I think a partial hysterectomy whilst we're in there might be worth doing. So this was without any formal diagnosis at this point, you know, but it was kind of like, to me, oh my God, all my pain could end from this, because that was pretty much how it was sold to me.
Yeah.
So I went away and I agreed that that's what I wanted to do. And he gave me some paperwork to look at, which was literally about a partial hysterectomy, but there was no information about endometriosis. And I did go off and I did Google, and I found bits and bobs online, but I still didn't really know. And I was kind of like, right, okay, well, he's telling me that this partial hysterectomy is absolutely going to work. So I went back in 8 weeks later. I'd had time off of work because the pain relief that he had put me on was still making me out of it. I couldn't function. I work in HR. I could not do my job doing that kind of stuff. So I went in, I had my operation. I was under for a good few hours. They took everything bar my ovaries, because I was 32, 33 at the time, 32, I think. I was 33 when I had it done. And just before I was just about to turn 33. So I'd had it done, and I came out, and I can tell you something, you don't realize how high your pain threshold is with endometriosis until you come out of that, because I came out of the operation, and whilst, don't get me wrong, I was under for a good long time and I'd had lots done and I was uncomfortable, but there was always a hum there that I didn't realize was there, of pain, and I couldn't feel it. It was really, really bizarre.
It's the weirdest feeling though, because I mean, after my surgery, a very different surgery, but a couple of months later, I suddenly just burst into tears one day and went, I'm not in pain. Because it took me so long to just realize, I was like, that's what it is. Because I was like, something's missing. It's like not wearing a piece of jewelry or something. I was just like, it's just not there.
It's bizarre. Do you know what? It was the weirdest thing. And I say this, I had a really good 9 months of, well, it was about 8 months of no pain. And then one day I woke up and the pain was back. And although I shouldn't have been bleeding, I was bleeding again. And they, obviously, you don't expect that.
No.
So you've had a hysterectomy, you've had a partial hysterectomy, you've got your ovaries, but bleeding shouldn't be happening.
Yeah.
And when I went back to the doctors about it, and the pain was getting worse, and it sort of came back like a vengeance. I knew exactly what the pain was. And they referred me back over to him, and he said, "It's endometriosis, it's come back." And I was like, well, I thought this was supposed to get rid of it. And this is because of my lack of knowledge of what it was that I actually had, or understanding of the treatment that he was providing me. I thought it was a cure at the time, and it wasn't.
I would say it's not your fault. I'm just going to put that out there. It's not your lack of knowledge. It's the fact that people treating you ignored every single thing that could have been it.
It's always been treated, it's a woman's issue, you know, it's acceptable, it's your periods are accepted. I mean, my mum never suffered, my grandmother really did, and because I've discovered since it's quite genetic, my daughter's already showing symptoms of it, and that scares me. But you know, when you know, it's period pain, Becki, just get on with it. That was pretty much my mother's attitude. Obviously now she feels really guilty for being that way with me, but
it's common as well, because like, even so, it's really quite weird actually. My grandma suffered very badly, and I've had the most wonderful conversations with her about like menstrual health and periods since I got diagnosed. And she, you know, whenever I do things like this, she's always really like, "Thank you for talking about it," because I literally couldn't when I was your age. It just was not something you could vocalize in any way. And even now, you're right. It's get on with it, it's your period. And you're like,
yeah,
it's not.
And it's horrible to see. I mean, like I said, my eldest daughter, she's just about to turn 13, and her periods are horrific already. She's incredibly heavy, and we're actually at the doctors having the conversations about, look, it's skipped a generation, because my eldest cousin also had the same problem, but my second eldest, she's not. So it seems to skip a generation in my family for some reason. That just seems to be the common theme. And my eldest is already showing signs, and we're being very open about it, and we're having conversations also without trying to put ideas in her head, because at that age, you know, they can play on it, so you've got to be careful. There's a fine line there, but
you can freely express how you're feeling about this and how much pain you're in, and you know.
Exactly. But I'm always running painkillers up to her at the school when she's on. It's ridiculous. So for somebody of her age. But anyway, going back to the partial hysterectomy, I digress, sorry. Going back to the partial hysterectomy, after that, when I started having problems again, I went back in, I was referred over to the same gynecologist, and he said to me, what we need to do then is, he explained that it wouldn't take the problem away. He said it could come back. I could end up with tissue growing again. And he said to me, he goes, the best thing to do is to do a full hysterectomy. But at your age, we're conscious of it. Because at this point when I saw him, I was still quite young. Well, not quite young. It was only a couple of years ago. But he said, we're going to put you on a drug called GnRH drug. And it was called Decapeptyl, the drug that I had. Mm-hmm. And it'll basically put you into menopause.
Is that HRT, isn't it? Similar?
No. So you go on that, and then they find the right HRT, because if you don't have the HRT, you'll end up with joint pains. You end up with them anyway, but you end up with all sorts of problems. You can end up with osteoporosis. And osteoporosis, is that the right word? Yeah. So you can end up with all sorts of issues from being quite young and having you're going through menopause and being switched off. He said, we'll do that, see if that works and helps the situation, and then we'll take your ovaries out and we'll get you on the right levels of HRT. Because you go into hot flushes, you go into horrific mood swings, you go into, so it was a bit of a way of preparing me for it. I went on to that drug, and what I wasn't prepared for, when you first go onto that drug, and I really struggled to find information online about it. I looked at YouTubers, I looked at everything, and a lot of Americans were going on to it, but they were going on to a different kind of GnRH drug. It wasn't Decapeptyl, but you get worse before you get better. So I had 2 months of getting worse, the pain getting worse, as well as my emotions spiraling out of control. I had pain in my knee like I'd never felt before. It was like joint pains. I just didn't expect what was happening to me. And when I went back to him to say all of this happened, yeah, no, it can be quite common. I wasn't given the information up front. I did give you the leaflet on the actual drug, though. Yes, I read through it. I read that it could make me a bit nauseous, and I read that it could have these side effects. I didn't realise it would make the pain worse.
Yeah.
But what I will say is the pain did go away after a couple of months, and I went back to where I was after I had my partial hysterectomy, and I felt better. The only thing I did have was obviously from where tissue had grown, I was getting, if I stood up too quick, I'd get like a sharp pain, or and it was usually from where it was snagging. I found, or it was explained to me later that probably what it was. But then the pandemic hit, so actually getting the operation became a bit of an issue, because I got put on this drug in February before everything shut down. And you're only supposed to be on the drug, I think, for a maximum of 12 months. And I was on it for a lot longer because they couldn't, because obviously I wasn't an emergency. It wasn't life-threatening to me. So I had to, and then they couldn't get the drug because of the pandemic. And I had phases of going in and out. It was not a nice journey, but I did finally get my hysterectomy. This is the thing, what they don't tell you when you have the hysterectomy is it doesn't necessarily cure the problem. Now I had my hysterectomy in May last year, so I'm coming up to 11 months now post hysterectomy. I don't have any pain at the moment. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know whether it's going to come back, because it's very clear it's not a cure. But again, I didn't find this out until after having it all done. And the consequences that I'm living with is I'm nearly 36 years old. I am a menopausal woman who has gained the best part of 2 stone and struggling to lose it, because as you do in menopause, it's hormones. It's not easy. I'm on HRT. If my doctors can't get my HRT in, which we've seen a few times from the pandemic, my emotions spiral out of control. My kids think I am a complete nutter sometimes. And my joints ache like I should be a hell of a lot older than I actually am. I mean, I said earlier about my knee. My knee joint is the worst thing. I used to love walking, and now every time I go walking, my knee blows up. And you still get, even though I'm on HRT and everything's managed, you get the hot flushes, you get life after having a hysterectomy. I am pain free, and I'm grateful for that. And you know what, some of these symptoms, I say I'd rather have that over the pain that I experienced. But it's difficult, and you're not made aware of this. You don't know what to expect, and even drug-induced menopause is not the same as when you are surgically put into menopause.
This is a big thing as well. Now, you will hear, lovely people watching, you will occasionally hear us say on lots of lives, oh, I'd still rather have it than the pain. But what you have to remember is that recovery isn't linear, and you do develop a slightly black sense of humor when you're in pain every single day for a very long amount of time. There are still, it's not linear. As you say, like, you're in your 30s and postmenopausal. I am 25 and I regularly have to do bowel and bladder diaries, because that's what I've been left with after my surgery. It doesn't work like it should anymore, and my stomach doesn't stretch because of my incisions. And things, you will hear us talk about how, and I would take it over the pain, but it doesn't mean everything's fine. And I think that's what's really important, is that we still don't know enough about this condition at all to be able to say, yeah, there you go, done. Surgery, course of this, away you go. That's not how it works. Like, I'm not on any form of hormone because I don't interact well with them. So I'm going to have my surgery again in 5 years? Something like that, But it's, what I'm trying to say is, you rarely get told the consequences of what you're doing. You just want to do something to make it stop. And that is not, I'll be honest, the best way to make medical decisions, but it's the way 1 in 10 of us have to make them, because that's the position we're in. Is there anything you found has helped with the HRT? Just because I know there'll be people watching who are in a similar position.
The HRT, I had to go back to the nothing's helped, nothing's changed in the sense of what I suffered with from an endometriosis point of view. But what I have found is I've had it changed a couple of times post hysterectomy, because I was put on one during induced, and then I was changed, and then I've had to be changed again a couple of times to find the right one, because there are so many different versions out there, and you can still have your symptoms shine through, menopausal symptoms shine through, and you have to find the right one with you. I have had stints of being off of it where the doctors have not been able to get it in, and it's all because of COVID and things that are going on. And I tell you something, when you come off of it, it's horrible. I mean, the hot flushes are just constant. It's like waves. You're dripping, you're sore everywhere, and you have brain fog. I mean, I could not remember how to spell certain words that I spell every day with it. So I will say with HRT, you've got to find the right one for you. And when you do get it, it's brilliant. It's not going to take away everything, but it is brilliant, and you find yourself a lot happier and a lot more. And the other thing I take are tablets specifically for menopause, and I found my hair's healthier again, and my teeth are better because I was getting toothache and sensitive teeth. So a bit like prenatal vitamins, they're like that for menopause, and I find that helps as well, just dealing with being in menopause.
Oh, Fab, send me if there's a link for those, send them afterwards, and I'll put them in the description, because I always like to make sure we're sharing resources for people if they're useful. What do you think if you could go back and tell your teenage self something about endometriosis and menstrual health and stuff? What do you think you'd say?
I think it would be something, what would I say? I wouldn't go and say anything to myself. I'd probably go and tell the teachers to start talking about it in school, because that's when it started.
It is.
But I would probably encourage myself to speak up a bit more to my mother and tell her that this doesn't feel normal, or have conversations more so with your friends about your periods, and it be okay than I did back then, because I found that I didn't talk to my friends as much as I probably should have done. And maybe I would have known that actually because even in school I was soaking through Tampax and towels. I used to carry a spare pair of pants and tights in my bag in case it happened in school.
Well, it's the moment you find out other people don't do that. Or for me, I was like, oh, you guys can stand on your period. It's like you're staying conscious. I'm like, surely everyone just passes out. This is normal, right? And everyone's like, no, what's wrong with you? And then you're like, oh wow, okay. But it's only those chance conversations. It's not discussed properly.
It was a mother of a boyfriend that I had at 17 that, when I got really unwell the first time round, that went, Becki, this isn't normal. You need to go and get help. And I ended up in hospital and ended up with my first operation. So, but I think teachers should be teaching this to girls. It should be part of sex education, puberty. It should be brought in.
It actually is now. So from last year, it is a legal requirement to teach menstrual health in England and Wales.
Do they touch on this sort of stuff?
So they should do, yes, because menstrual health is different to periods. So menstrual health is talking about bleeding and tampons and that kind of stuff. So obviously, as it's a new requirement, I'm sure there'll be some stumbling until they get it right. But it is a massive improvement that it has to be discussed. A big piece of advice, just because I was speaking to my sister the other day about types of pill. And a big piece of advice I have for you, if your GP isn't great, or you're struggling, particularly if you're a teenager, if you're struggling to find someone to talk to, book an appointment at a sexual health clinic, because they are the most knowledgeable people about contraception and periods and sexual health and menstrual health. It's really useful, non-judgmental space if you're struggling with like quite an old school GP. And like, you know, if you're finding a pill doesn't work for you, go talk to a sexual health nurse. It's all they do. They will be able to tell you so much more than your GP, who will just give you microgynon. So it's just a recommendation I have for anyone who's a teenager or younger, or just wants a different outlet for information. It's something to embrace, definitely.
Do like local lowdowns and stuff like that have that sort of information available to children? Do you know?
I'm not sure.
I don't know if you have local lowdowns where you are.
I don't think we do. What are they?
So they're youth, and they're for mental health, they're for all sorts of things. But one of the other things that they cover is an aspect of the family planning, sexual health, you know, promoting safe sex, all of that sort of stuff. And you can go in if you're having issues with this sort of stuff. You're able to
Yeah,
also talk
they
to them about
definitely
that.
should do, or they should be able to signpost you. But I mean, like, so before my surgery, I had the Marina coil, and I had to go and get a sexual health screening before it, because you do, like, they just make you go and do it. And I went to just one of the gum clinics that are through, like, your local NHS trust will have like it's so annoying, every county does it differently. So like where I live at the moment has sexual health centres everywhere for some reason, but where I used to live, there were like 4 in the county, basically in the corners. It was useless. But when I did go, I ended up having a really useful chat. And like, normally you go to the doctors, there might be like a leaflet on the pill. There's that like green leaflet on the combined pill. When I went to a couple of sexual health clinics, they've all got like a rainbow of leaflets about different types of pill and contraception and stuff. It's what they do. And I would say, if that's a route you'd like to go down, particularly for endometriosis, if you're trying to find a hormone that works for you, you have nothing to lose. It is free. We're very lucky. So it is worth speaking to somebody. And if you have a teenager as well who might need to go and speak to someone about it, it's a good outlet. Like, I went to boarding school, and I really wish, I loved my time there, but I wish we'd had more than one nurse who was capable of having a conversation about pills. We had a lovely lady called Elspeth who you could be like, what's happening? And then everyone else, you're like, not saying a word. You're all terrifying. And it is, it's so important to talk about it when you're younger, and to talk about what's happening. Like, not to pry, but was your daughter embarrassed when you're talking about periods, or have you made it quite like a normal conversation?
It's a normal conversation. She's grown up in a household with me being in and out of pain, having quite in-depth conversation. She's overheard stuff from me, so it's a very open subject in our house. My younger daughter, however, who's coming up to that age, is very shy about it. So my eldest is more like me. She's open. She's been probably involved and heard a lot more of what's been going on with them. I mean, they used to come, there'd be times where I'd be doubled over on the sofa. I couldn't get off the sofa. I couldn't walk around, and they would go and make me a cup of tea or something like that to help me, or go and sort my hot water bottle out. Particularly my eldest has done that quite a lot. So we are open in the household. We are doing a diary at the moment for my eldest to monitor her periods and the hormonal issues that she's having alongside of them, and the pain that she's going through. And we've got to go back to the GP in it's over a 3-month spell, so actually next month we'll be coming up to our 3rd month, to see if there's a pattern there. But they will look to put her on the pill. They've already said that to me, and they are taking into account my history. But we are fortunate. We've got although she wasn't very great from my point of view, she was miss sort of, not, she didn't touch on endometriosis, she didn't look at it as a possibility. She is listening to me now. I've had that diagnosis, and actually knowing that that is in the family and taking it into consideration with my daughter.
That's really important. Like, that's really good, because it's one of those things where it's, if you don't know it's a possibility, you will often get every diagnosis, as you know, everything but once you have the magical endometriosis word, there you go. For example, for me, it was post-surgery going, no, there's literally photos of my endometriosis, like, this is the thing. Once you have that point, it's like, they will just go, yeah, sure. I mean, I got my pelvic physio by being like, I'm having problems after my endometriosis surgery. And it was like, they went, not me, just passed me on. It was great. But it is something that, like, it's worth fighting for the diagnosis. It's worth having it in your notes. It's worth being able to go to a doctor, whether it's for your child to say, this is in the family, or it's for yourself 5 years on, if you've had no problem, and go, I've had issues with this, Don't be scared to own your diagnosis, I would say. Like,
I definitely agree with that. One thing I will say, because there's not a great lot of knowledge of it, I don't know about you, because I actually know you have asthma like I do. You ring the doctors up, you tell them you've got a problem with asthma, they'll get you in immediately, or they'll tell you exactly what you need. Yep. But you don't get the same reaction with endometriosis. It doesn't get the same treatment. And yet, okay, I get asthma physically affects your breathing, and I know this is probably a bad comparison, but
It's not
the
the
pain
chronic
and
condition.
the problems that it causes, because it's not visible, whereas when you can't breathe properly, it's completely visible.
Yeah.
You know, it's looked on in two different ways. It's ridiculous. I think there needs to be more awareness of it. I think people need to talk about it.
It's a really good point though, and actually this is something I experienced the other day. I think what am I, a brittle asthmatic? I think it makes me sound very breakable, but I have terrible lungs. So I went in, and normally you ring up and you get an appointment, and it's, you know, it happens, it's pretty good. However, on this occasion, there's a new asthma nurse, and bless her, she was like, oh, like, I've had a chest infection, came off the antibiotics, they weren't strong enough. I said they wouldn't be strong enough. So I had to go back in, and she was like, oh, can you bring your inhaler? Because I think it might be your inhaler technique. And I was like, excuse me? Like, I've been asthmatic for 20 years. But then when I walked out, I went, that's what I got in every single endometriosis appointment. And I didn't really bat an eyelid, because that's the attitude. But getting it once in an asthmatic sphere where I'm used to actual care, I was furious. And I went, it just reminded me that we have to keep fighting to get that better standard of care.
You do. And if it's an unknown entity, I can tell you now, COVID first time round in September, my lungs have been destroyed since. Every time I've been in, I've had problems with the asthma. They don't know whether it's asthma, they don't know whether it's COVID, and I've not had the same amount of, because it's an unknown entity. So when it's in that kind of, because I think endometriosis was in that, you've possibly got pelvic inflammatory disease, which is caused from an infection. That was what I had referred to for the best part of 10 years. That was literally the category that it was put in, whereas the problems I'm having with my asthma now is being put in the COVID category. It's they don't know, so they just need to put it somewhere, and that's where it gets put.
Exactly. I think that's
Sorry, I'm
lovely.
ranting now, aren't I?
No, it's not at all. I think, thank you so much. I think honestly, your experience is, while I'm so sorry you've had to go through it, it is incredibly informative for other people. And I think this is so important, and I can't wait for everyone to see this. This is so exciting. So thank you so much for joining me, and we will see you guys next week as well for our final live of the series with Laura, the Hungry Sewist, where we're talking about the road after surgery and some other bits about symptoms improving and sort of long-term management, which will be lovely. And a final word, don't forget that this weekend is the reveal day for Sew Yellow for Endo. So sew something yellow, remember, donate £1, and please, for my sanity, remember to put your Instagram handle in your donation so I can match the two up. Otherwise it takes literal days. But I'm overwhelmed and overjoyed to see how many of you are already getting involved. So thank you again, Becca. You have been wonderful, and we will see you guys next time. If anything in this video has prompted a thought, message us, and please check out the Just Giving page if you feel like women shouldn't have to go through this.